Blessings, soul family. This is the Activate Evolution podcast. And today I am broadcasting from our community, New Earth Pathways. And we are going to do a Golden Lotus transmission. But before we go into the transmission, I wanted to just kind of take you all on the journey of where the Golden Lotus came from. So some of you know a little bit of my past as far as my connection to what I call the blue men. The blue men have been kind of in and out of my life for years. I don't even really know how far. I know it goes back to at least 2008. But I've had a couple of experiences with them, and usually how they would first come into my life, I've been a healer, or I've worked with people individually for most of my life. I got my first practitioner's license I was almost 18 when I started working one-on-one with people, and have very actively been in that role for, well, ever since, right? And so they would kind of pop in and out when I would do sessions on people. And when I started doing sessions on people, when I was kind of reprogramming the brain, they started kind of coming a little bit more. And I thought that it was really interesting that the more that I was reprogramming on that level, the more they kind of would come into the room and help facilitate. Well, I think it was probably about 2016. This was after my friend Rob had passed away, and it was after my spine injury. I actually woke up one night because I thought somebody turned on the lights in my room, and I woke up and there were like 50 of them in my room, and I immediately kind of panicked because they weren't there to facilitate a healing. They weren't just hanging out. They were there for a reason. And I can remember telepathically getting the message, don't be afraid. And right when the one that was standing next to my bed kind of telepathically said that, his long fingers came towards me and put his fingers around my neck. And I knew he was healing, helping support heal the spine injury that I had had. And I immediately went unconscious. And ever since then, they've just kind of been part of my life. And this is what I'm going to say about this. I call them the blue men because they don't want to be called anything else. And I asked why that was at one point, and they said, just like everybody in America, they're all Americans, but they're not all Caucasian. And everybody that's in Mexico, they're all, you could say, if they live in Mexico and they're part of that culture, we could all say that they're Mexican, but they're not all Mexican, and then same thing with Asia. Like you could say, oh, I live in Asia, so I'm Asian, but you're not actually, you don't have to be Asian. And I think that the easiest way that they were showing is the United States, because we have lots of Americans, but we're not all Caucasian. And that's what they were showing me, is that like, even in the Palladians, they're not all Palladians, just like, and, we could go on and on and on. I think you guys get the point. And that made a lot of sense to me, but I didn't let it stop there, because I wanted to know, well, what does that actually mean? And what they showed me was that what we're experiencing when we have contact with with the more of the galactics, you could say, is that we're communicating through a level of consciousness, and is all they're holding is consciousness, right? And that delivery of consciousness is how conscious we can be in meeting what that consciousness is actually saying. And from there, we kind of break down the place of identifying in different species, because the truth is they're in an expression of source intelligence just as we are. I could go into that a little bit more, and I'm going to go ahead and say this because I think that this is really interesting. And then I'm going to get to the point. One of the other things that they showed me, and in my book, I talk about this a little bit with Dolores Cannon, how she was saying that, you know, every kind of like the entire universe is waiting for humans to ascend. And this is giving me chills, so I'm obviously supposed to say this. What I was told by meeting consciousness with consciousness, expression with expression, is that we truly are the most advanced beings that there are. And the reason that is true is because of our DNA. And we were given little codes of galactic DNA so that we could actually ascend the galactics. So everything is inside out, and this isn't coming from a place of superiority or we're better. It's not about that, you guys, but it kind of dials it back to this place of they're supporting us because of what we're here to do. Because by us moving into 100% human potential, we are helping them. And that's where that unity pattern comes in, to where that technology turns on in us and it turns on in the entire universe. Meaning, once we move into full expression, the universe is in full expression, because even the galactics are part of the matrix. So let's go into the Golden Lotus. So now I have this relationship going with the blue men, and I've had 2 experiences where in dream state, I was brought, you could say, aboard ship. And one of them was for the transverse element. And that's an element that I know a lot of you have worked with for quite some time. It's an element that feeds the light body, and it helps transition from density to light, or particles of waves, high spin states. And the second one is the Golden Lotus. So it was in my dream state that I woke up aboard ship, and every single time I'm on the same ship, and it was this big, it's like this big atrium is part of it, and it's like 50 feet high, and it's probably only maybe 15 to 20 feet around. And it's just lined with all these different plants. I mean, plants that you've never even seen before. I mean, there's some of them that are glowing. There's some of them that move, and they move around, and they're luminous. You'd think about how they were multidimensional, very multidimensional. And so I'm kind of show up, and I'm like, oh, okay, here I am. What's going to happen now? And so one of the blue men came over, and I held out my hands, and he put a flower in my hands. And he said telepathically, he or she, that one day I would know what to do with it, but that it was time to bring it back so that it would be in my field. And when the time was right, it would tell me what to do. So I wake up in my bed, and I'm sitting up, and I have my hands out like this, and I could feel the weight of the flower in my hands. And I couldn't see it as much as I could see it in my dream state, but I knew that it was there. So I put it in a little container, and I put it away. And it wasn't till about a year later that I had the hit that I was supposed to pull one of the leaves off and ingest it. And so I did. And this was right before I was going out to California to meet, some of you guys know Erica. She's a good friend of mine. And I was telling her about my experience. And I said, well, when I pulled the leaf, another one grew back. And I was like, that's really cool, right? What do you think that's about? And she's like, well, it's rejuvenation. And I said, yes. And I was like, but you know what I thought when that happened is that it's never going to go away. It'll never run out. And then later that when we were in California, a couple of days later, we were recording a podcast, and I could tell that the consciousness of the plant inside of me was doing something. I couldn't really tell what it was doing, but I knew it was doing something. And we're recording this podcast, and there was some noises going on in the background, and all of a sudden I just started tapping into the consciousness behind it. And it was the first time that I went into full expression. And I actually started speaking about what it was to be an expression. And I think at the time I called it projection. And I had this whole experience during the podcast. And I was talking about why we want to go into projection and where the projection is coming from. Well, now this is all I teach, right? Because I integrated the consciousness of that one leaf and the ability of what it is to exist without, I'm not even, it's like, it's not even that we're rejuvenating. There's no reason to rejuvenate because we're in perfect form. And that's what this golden lotus is holding, is the consciousness of holding the ability to be in perfect form. But if something were to take something away, it's not actually taking anything, that it immediately comes back. So you can just kind of play with that in your mind right now, what that really means. Well, what I see now is, as we're going to do this here pretty soon, is that the flower is just consistently in expression. It's always in an expression of pure intelligence, and it knows exactly what to do if that intelligence is altered. It just keeps shining. And that allows the frequency to move it back into. That's what our bodies have the ability to do. That is our bodies at 100% potential. It's in perfect form. And if anything alters that, it just moves right back into perfect form. So is it being healed? I think it's just moving back into perfect form. I don't think that the flower ever knows that it's anything but being perfect. And that's what we are in our true essence, is we are in the golden lotus. And the golden lotus is what I named the flower, because it does kind of look like a lotus. And I call it the golden lotus because it is very luminous. It's depending on how high you can hold your consciousness to look at the flower, is how much you will see it as either light. It can look like kind of like an aura where it could be that you just sense it. But when you meet it at the frequency it is very golden and shimmery and luminous. You can see through it, but you can see all the different colors and kind of that golden shimmery experience that it's holding. I know some of you have experienced the golden lotus, and it will be a big part of the retreat that will be live in the hot springs in April. I will be bringing the golden lotus for everybody to experience on a daily basis. And it really does build up a frequency for your body to hold consciousness of what it is to hold expression through the intelligence of your DNA. So with that, I'm just getting chills all through this. It's so funny. I'm just so excited to share the frequency of this with you. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to do the Golden Lotus transmission. I actually have it sitting right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a leaf in my hands, and I'm going to transmit it to you through the evolution technology. You do not need to know what the evolution technology is. If you want to, you can look up activateevolution.com and you can see the symbol of the technology in the corner. It's our logo as well. And it is a scalar technology that is holding the ability to shift into full expression. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the symbols into my hands first. And then I'm going to take the leaf. I'm going to hold the leaf, let that move into the symbols. And then I'm just going to move my hands and let you all absorb the frequency of the lotus. And then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about what everybody experienced. If you would like to receive the golden lotus through the symbols of your hands, I'm going to show you how to draw them on your hands. So the first one is going to look kind of like an E, and then you're just going to do 3 dots. So you're just going to go like this, and then you go 3 dots. And if you don't have it perfect, that's okay. So that is the luminous. And then the second one is a little tree. So it goes down and it goes like this. And then there's 3 little lock-ins. And then if you want to put there's a couple little branches on there if you want to put a couple branches. So it's just like this. And then 1, 2, 3. And then if you want to put the little branches, you can. So that is scalar or ska. And then the last one are 2 little C's. It's a little C here, a big C on this side, and then there's just a little line that connects them. And that's the 33. So we say Lu Ska 33, which is luminous scalar 33. And then we'll just push those into the hands like this to activate them. I'm going to grab the golden lotus here. Okay, I'm going to be putting it in my hands. We're activating it through the symbols. And then we'll move into the transmission. So if you'd like to hold your hands up to receive it, you're welcome to, but either way, you're going to receive. Okay, so I'm getting that everybody's supposed to bring their hands into kind of a cupped position and sensitize yourself because the leaf is now in your hands. So sensitize yourself to either feeling it, seeing it. And once you move to a place where you're seeing it, feeling it, you just know that it's there. There's no right or wrong. I want you to get one of your finger and pick it up and put it in your mouth. And then just let that absorb. For me, it feels like those pop rock candies that you used to eat, kind of bubbles. And it'll just dissolve right onto your tongue. And then usually you might feel a little pressure in the back of your head as it's attuning your frequency patterns to hold the consciousness. Just allowing yourself to have that experience. All right, so that feels complete. If you'd like to bring your hands to your prayer position, we say thank you. I love you. It is done. So now I want to open it up to either sharing, discussion, questions. And again, if you'll just raise your hand on your Zoom link. And if nobody has anything to share, then I can talk a little bit about the different things that the flower does, but let's open it up to discussion if people have questions. All right, Carolyn.
Hi there.
Hi.
So are you going to be making any products with this?
With the Golden Lotus?
Yeah.
So I used to have an Ormus elixir. It's not on the website right now because we're really moving into the technology, but the technology is holding the frequency of it as well. But right now, where I see us doing the Golden Lotus the most is going to be in retreat setting, because it is very much an accelerator. And when you're holding the field for a certain amount of time and you're consistently ingesting it, it's probably the best way to really amplify what it is it's doing. So that is kind of what we're looking at for right now. That may change, but for right now, that's the way I'm going to be using the Golden Lotus.
Okay.
Thank you, Carolyn. Sandy?
I just wanted to share that I'm kind of blown away by revealing to us that the whole universe, which is in the matrix, of all these beings, palladium or all of them, are actually waiting for us to wake up ultimately 100%. I'd love to hear more about that.
So our DNA, and we talk a lot about the DNA, is, let's just trace it back to when I first remember working with the DNA. This is so let's trace it back to the very beginning of time. Okay. So for me personally, I can remember separating from source and actually being an observation as source. And the next thing that I did was to start to put the frequency of pure source frequency into codes. And that's what all I did. I just put them into codes. And at that point, the DNA was not that I did the DNA, but that was part of what I did. I wasn't the only state of consciousness that was doing it. And so the DNA was created. And at the time, it was created so that that pure intelligence wouldn't be lost, because once it became an observation, then what started to happen? Well, observation is the creation of form, which is the creation of density, which creation of the matrix. And so it continued to go, but the code of pure source intelligence was put in DNA. It's not DNA on a physical level, but it was put somewhere so that it wasn't going to be lost. So I don't know, if you read my book, you can kind of read some of the other things that I experienced as a conscious being in the creation of where we are now. But when Dolores came to me and she was saying that, hey, this is true. And I was very much working with those codes. And basically what I was doing is reversing all space and all time, and anything that has ever been created back to the God particle is what I call it in my book. Is you basically erase everything, go back to the God particle. Well, our DNA actually has very specific codes that get turned on. And the way that we do that is by moving into the expression of those codes without reflection. I mean, this is everything I teach, right? So everything in the matrix, including us, is the matrix. Like, we are the matrix if we're in observation of the matrix. And the same is true for everything that we're in observation of. I mean, it makes sense, right? That would include the Palladians and all the galactics and just pretty much anything that you can think of. And whether or not we're ready to hear this or not, it's still the expression of the matrix, unless we're an expression of pure source intelligence. So when I was told that, it made sense to me, because if I am a being that it has the technology or those codes in my DNA, which we're proving now is true, you guys, that we're only using what, maybe 8% of our electric charges of our body that have intelligence, that have the ability to move online and move into an expression of those codes. Well, what happens is when we start to do that, we break the matrix. Well, what happens to everything that's in the matrix? So sit with that. And I think you're going to come up with the answer to what your question was. Like, really sit with that. I mean, everyone really sit with that, because it kind of blows your mind. At that point, everything is in pure expression of that intelligence, and the matrix doesn't exist. So what does that mean? Yeah. So I'm answering your question in a very roundabout way, because it's going to be more powerful for you to sit in that and feel in your body what that feels like, the truth behind it, because it's going to tell you, Sandy, the truth behind that. It's going to tell you, just like it told me. Thank you,
The
Sandy.
first particle of existence.
And is it really a particle? Like, it's something, it's like when that was the other thing that I kind of have fun with, when telecommunication is so much better, because you don't have to put a word in order to communicate. It's very pure to telecommunicate, because there's no hang up on words and definition of words, and words are part of the matrix too, right? But we have to use them in order to communicate at this point. But once we start to telecommunicate, then it gets very, very pure and very, very precise. And it's consciousness through frequency, right? Or once we hit pure frequency, it's telethought. It's pure frequency of that intelligence through an expression of thought, but the thought is through pure source intelligence. So when we talk about these things and we're trying to define different things, it's not really what it is. it's because we're in the consciousness of the language that we're using. It's holding a denser form than the purity of what's actually behind it. Thank you, Sandy. Is there anybody else that would like to share? Okay. So I think what we'll do is go ahead and sign off on the podcast. So thank you everybody for listening. Angel, hang tight and I'm going to get to you. And if you haven't already, please visit activateevolution.com and you will see New Earth Pathways right there. We'd love for you to join us. And until we meet again, go and live to your highest potential.